Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Entrican, coming to you on this Monday, November 17th, as Rhode Island FC bow out of the playoffs, falling to the Riverhounds 1-0 in the Eastern Conference Finals. We're going to talk about it. We're going to go through a wake, a process today. We're going to mourn the dead and then maybe move on. I don't know. Plenty of things to talk about in this now off season that we've promoted ourselves to. But I want to introduce our wonderful co-hosts for the day, bringing the entire band together here. We've got Jason, Carey, and Torin Kelly with me. Torin, we're going to start with you. How have you been, and why in the world are you on a podcast right now at 1 a.m. your time?
I mean, hey, I wouldn't miss this for the world. You guys know it. I've missed my Rhode Island FC family since being overseas, but I'm doing great. I think, barring the very sad result, it's been good times over here, and I'm ready to get back into the game, back into the Raising Anchor game.
He's trying to take your spot, Jason. Watch out. Jason, are you okay? I've had a very long ride with you over these last 72 hours. You were quiet at times. You were dead on the inside at times. And I just got to know, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm hanging in there. I think when you multiple heartbreaks, it starts to get easier, right? I think, like you said, the very sombering drive home gives a lot of time to reflect on not only this game, but like the season as a whole.
I mean, you were sad. I was sad. My dog crying behind us right now. She was sad for different reasons. I'll be honest. It didn't feel good to have this loss land so heavily, knowing that we didn't exactly get to replicate the same amount of success. We still saw, I think, what we can say is a ton. We'll save that for a little bit later in the show. But I will also say it didn't hurt as bad going out the second time in playoffs. I don't want to say I'm getting used to it. I'm getting numb to the pain, but not the way things wanted to go in Pittsburgh this weekend.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like last year felt a lot more rough. This was definitely, evoke some emotions, but I feel like I'm getting through it a little bit better.
You have to find your support group, a supporters group, if you will, and then, again, commiserate that way. We're going to jump into the Pittsburgh experience overall, but Torin, how have you been? I feel like it's been a minute since you've been in the chair. I'm sorry that we're bringing you back in here at the end of all things this season. How's life been, and what's it like going, across the pond?
I mean, hey, it's better late than never. But no, it's going good. It's been a long time since I made my last appearance. I made it just before I left over, and it's been good. I've been many a late night watching Rhode Island FC, but it's definitely been worth it, especially as up until Saturday we had been winning most of our games in the last couple months. But no, things have been really good. Just kind of going through it day by day. It's definitely going to be a lot harder with having no RAFC for the next, 6 or 7 months. But I'm definitely ready to get back on here and talk some Rhode Island FC.
Hey, it's a good thing that we're not on the same schedule so that you can have both windows, because God forbid if we were on that same window, I don't know what you would do with your life, especially in those summer months. So you are welcome very much for that. Have you converted any fans to Rhode Island FC across the pond, or have you?
Actually, a good couple. I've got a good couple who are now fans of the show and now have watched a couple games with me so far. So it's definitely good. I mean, to anyone that hasn't never been over here, if you are a true soccer fan, I really recommend you come over here and you live in this culture, whether it's going to the pub and watching the match or being in the stadium. It's like being in our Defiance group every single day. It's pretty incredible, and they just love soccer here. So to be able to show them kind of how we do things over in America, and if anything, kind of break the stigma around the U.S. soccer and not being up to par, and showing them the passion that we've got. I love it, and they've been loving it as well.
Jason, I don't know about you. Torin loves it. Did you love Pittsburgh? Let's just get right in and rip this Band-Aid off, because I'm not sure I was a fan of the city. I'm not sure if I was a fan of the stadium, and I'm definitely not sure if I'm a fan of this team here in the Riverhounds.
To get, we'll start off with the compliment sandwich. The view was very nice from the parking lot, the skyline, the lights, and the city, like, and all the bridges. That part looked great. When we get to the actual fan experience, I'd say, like, most fans, you say, oh, they just have a couple of bad eggs. Like half of them are bad eggs. Like, don't get me wrong, there was definitely some friendly Pittsburgh fans, but more of the experience was people antagonizing us, just being, not very welcoming. And like the game hadn't even started yet. Like I get it during the game, like talk some crap or whatever, but like, I think we've had pretty good experience of just like, oh wow, like 50 to 75 people just traveled 10 hours from another state for a second division soccer game. Like, like this is kind of cool. Instead, they're like, no, I hate you. I hope you die.
It's interesting because like we all talk about the collective responsibility to grow the game, right? And yet, and I think this is pretty evenly split on the fence of supporters groups are envisioned as like the most passionate fans, the ones to lift their club up at all times. And then there's the other side of the fence that it's like it's designed for the pure hooligans and the hooliganism that's attached to the sport so that they can go and be those like those personalities, those problems when it comes to game time. We've heard of stories about Pittsburgh, Detroit specifically as well. We haven't yet interacted with those groups. That was the first time for us. And I have to say, like, I didn't mind it, but it was a bit surprising that like you can hate JJ Williams all you want. You can hate Chico all you want, but like I didn't do anything to you, my guy. Like let's calm it down until we're in the stadium and then see where things go. And sparks did fly. Like I don't know if we're going to talk about it too much tonight, but it was definitely an eye-opening experience around like what maybe USL doesn't want to spotlight, but it could grow as this league grows. Torin, I'll put it over to you since you see this on a much more local and frequent level. Would you say that hooliganism is a big part of the spotlight of fandom when you're out there, or is it mostly just a bunch of rowdy fans who are diehards that love their team and the hooliganism is a really minor part of it?
I think it's definitely starting to die off, and I think thankfully die off and kind of gets a little slower and slower. But I think there's definitely a part of it, and I think that a part of that kind of mentality still lives on here. I think, especially when you look at it in the sense of like that kind of pure hatred, being in a town that is predominantly like, for instance, Chelsea supporters or London supporters. If you start talking about Arsenal or Tottenham, there's no love whatsoever. There's pure hatred. So I think there's definitely a bit of it in that sense. But I think the level of fighting, I know some of the Detroit people were saying that Pittsburgh fans were stealing scarves. That I think is a bit far and not really what the game should be and how the game normally is around here. But I would flip the question back to you guys, and I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later. But did it almost feel like Pittsburgh fans were trying to make a rivalry of this by kind of antagonizing the fans?
No, I don't think so, because one, we talked to the fans that were more even keel, and they very much said that Detroit is their rival. They really didn't care about us other than the fact that it was a playoff game, and again, they have a pretty decent record against us now. And they weren't exactly going at us in the game until they went up, which is, I think, is something perfectly natural when you don't want to like overstep your arrogance until your team matches or reflects what you're trying to, the trash talk you're trying to deliver. So for the most of the game, at least that first half, I heard were fans complaining that we were too loud and that our flags were blocking their view because one of Defiance's members had the giant chicken, the fighting chicken banner, which is huge. I think it's the biggest flag they have. And he was waving it in front of our section, and we only filled up half of that column. So the other half were Riverhounds fans that couldn't see the game, and they were complaining for us to sit down. They were complaining for us to stop being so loud, and they were complaining for us to put that giant flag down. None of those requests were
it fell on
granted.
Deaf ears.
Yes, very much so. But the Steel Army, they were loud. They were, from my travel experiences, I've been to 6 stadiums now. Definitely the best fan experience I've seen so far across all of them. They were loud. They were showing up. But it was once they went up, it's like all the eyes turned on Defiant 1636, and that's when their trash talking started. And it was surprising. Like, we saw teenagers, young children, giving the bird, cursing at our group, and it's like, okay, are we going to start cussing out 13-year-olds? Like, is that should be beneath us, but then at the same time, how do we respond? So it was a very weird position. I don't think Pittsburgh handled it well, both in the positioning of the supporter group, in the security of the supporter group. I just want to say shout out to Harry, who's the RIFC away traveling liaison rep. He did an incredible job. He needs to get promoted by Pittsburgh And Pittsburgh needs to pay Harry's salary next year for Rhode Island because of the amount of work he did. I mean, he literally saved lives on the night. I'm not even like waxing poetic on that. He was a very big and important part of not just this experience, but all of the traveling experience. So it was really interesting to see Pittsburgh react the way they did, but they only did it after they went up, which rightfully theirs. I mean, they went up, they were winning the game, and they went on to win the game. And so, like, I don't hate anyone from it, but I was a little bit surprised getting flipped off by a 12-year-old and going, "What do I do back to this person right now?" Which was nothing, but like, it was an interesting place. Jason, did you feel anything different?
No, I mean, I think that's pretty spot on. I think it was funny the very few security guards that they did have were just actually watching the game, not really paying attention to anything that's kind of going on. So from a logistics standpoint, maybe they could have done a little better there. The funny thing too is we're not next to the supporters group, but we were kind of way too close to them. Generally, you put them on opposite ends of the stadium. We're just like right over here and they're here.
I had a theory about that because the way Highmark Stadium is, and people told me when we were traveling down that it is a great stadium. It is not a great stadium. It is a great location, but it is a temporary stadium that has just grown roots, and so it's not configured well. What I figured was because the other side of the stadium is where those suites are for that box, that Highline box where the ownership was. A lot of people don't know this, but the entire ownership group was out. So Mike Parkhurst was there, Brett Johnson, the other usual actors like Pete Batista, Dan Krober, they were all there. We had a special guest in the supporter group, Mayor Don Grebian from Pawtucket was in the supporter group celebrating and chanting along the entire night. But I don't think they wanted Defiance right next to the people that paid like $5,000 for one of those suites. So I think that's why they moved us to the other side. But I mean, listen, it was a good night until it suddenly wasn't. And I think that the traveling fans made the most of it. I think it was a great time. And honestly, I got hurt a couple times mentally and emotionally on the night, but the knife went into the heart. The dagger went full hilt when I saw Brett Louie walk out with that Eastern Conference Final trophy and hand it to the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. That was pain reincarnate, and I didn't like it. I didn't like seeing it because I remember talking to Brett last year. He did not deliver the Eastern Conference Final trophy last year when we won it. He went to the Western Conference playoffs instead. And I asked him, "Hey, if we come back next year, would you deliver it?" He's like, "I'll come back and deliver it." I didn't realize that we had that conversation. And there he was handing it to the people who I didn't want winning it at the time. So that was a tough break. But, other than the emotional damage that occurred, we move on, right? We got to talk about this game. Is there anything left from the Pittsburgh experience that you have to call out, whether it's the city in general, the stadium at end? Like, I'm glad they're going to get an expanded stadium. They definitely need it. They sold it out. It was packed. It was a great environment for them, not so much us. Any final takes on the stadium?
No, I mean, I think if they have their new nice expanded stadium and we could like turn our results around, maybe not a terrible away day.
Yeah, maybe just bring like an extra 100 Defiance next time and go along with it. So listen, let's get into this game and recap and try to figure out what exactly happened here. Lots of questions on the night, and I think we got to start just fairly with the fact that actually, wait, hold on. We need to give some flowers out. I'm jumping ahead. This is why a one-day turnaround for show prep doesn't work. Jason, I forgot. Torin, I completely forgot. We need to celebrate Rhode Island FC alumni here. Mark Doyle is a champion. One USL 1 championship with one Knox. There's too many ones in that statement. You can't see him in this picture because he's literally standing right behind their captain as he's holding the trophy as they won it. But our first Rhode Island FC player to have won a major league title, let's call it that way, in our short club history. Do you think Mark Doyle now considers himself, like when he talks about his legacy, do you think he will like omit the RAFC chapter and just kind of skip over that? I came from the Irish Premier League and now I'm here in one Knox, or do we get some credit in his success as we developed him and moved him on? Torin, we'll start with you.
Oh, I mean, I think I'm hoping he would never forget us, but I definitely think, I mean, he's evidently a good luck charm. 2 years, 2 trophies. I think if anything, he should be the first player on our signing list if this offseason, even if he doesn't play a minute.
Would you call that the luck of the Irish?
You didn't say it. I didn't say it. You did. That's all I'm saying. I don't want to jinx it, but no, I think definitely Mark Doyle. It's obviously great to see the alumni, and I think most of the alumni this season have been very good. I know we've talked a lot about Connor McGlynn as well, who's had a very successful season at Westchester, but I think Mark Doyle is one that's kind of went swept under the rug. I think a lot of people didn't really remember him as being a really important part of this RAFC team until we kind of lost him. And then I remember all throughout the beginning of the season we were talking about how much we missed Mark Doyle. So I think it's definitely, he was such an underrated player for us last year, I think. So it was nice to see him, come out on top.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of funny. There was a good chance with how well Hearts of Pine was doing with another alumni, Nathan Messer, that there's a good chance that someone from USL 1 was going to win with past ties to RAFC. Good to see him do well there. It, like Torin said, there was this period of time where we realized our attack was kind of struggling and realized like, oh yeah, did we really replace Doyle? Not so much.
Definitely a vacuum, definitely a void. I mean, if you think about it, the argument was it was Dwayne Atkinson who really stepped in to fill in for that front winger. And then we found out he was more of a traditional real midfielder. Then we heard that we would be getting Matthew Ndongo, and then realized that that was a 2026 to 2027 project. So yeah, I don't think we ever filled his shoes, to be completely honest. I think that is a void. And maybe you could argue that that was kind of one of the first things where if we were to put Kano's year under a microscope, that's maybe one of the first questions you ask, because he retooled, I think, successfully on the defensive side of things. He went out and got an accomplished midfielder in Maxi Rodriguez, but that right wing back and then that, forward, left winger, right wing, whichever side of the field you needed him on, never really seemed to get kind of swept back up. So now seeing Doyle go back out and win a championship with one Knox, it's kind of like, okay, maybe do you want to come back? I mean, I heard fans talk to me, and we were talking about like, what players would you like to see us sign next season as I start to work on like the player projections and transfer stuff. And someone came to me and said, do you think we could get Nate Messer back? And I was like, do you think Nate Messer would want to come back? And that's not any ill will towards like his experience with Rhode Island, but he is like a local hero now. He's getting sizable playing minutes, and he looks like he's having the time of his life. So outside of the need for a salary bump, I can't see why Messer would want to leave Portland in the next 12 months before he could really see like how high is high for the left back up there playing for the Hearts of Pine. Lots of comments in the chat. I forgot that we're doing a show tonight and Jason's not exactly doing his job over here. Tim, we're going to talk about the Cheesecake Conspiracy on the Monday Mailbag next week. Jeff, welcome to the show. Ryan Healy, legendary analytic brain of Tide Talk, coming in. And I think those comments are all about how much he hated the small children yelling directly at him and the rest of the Tide Talk guys at that game. Justin, Ewan, welcome to the show. Sweet Diego here. Just asking about this Mark Doyle and how he wants him back. I want him back too, Diego. So let's get into this formation, because I think this is where the crux of a lot of our problems start for the night for Kano. Jason, just this graphic is going to be wrong because, like always, I pulled this one instead of building our own. I pulled it from the professionals, and the professionals got it completely off kilt.
Yeah. So we had Koke Vegas and net, Frank Nodarce, Karifa Yao, and Amity Diop in that back three. Amos Shapiro Thompson out on that right wing with Ugo Bacharach, Mark Ibarra, and then Aldair Sanchez out left, with a front three of Noah Fuson, JJ Williams, and Jose Quizera. While we did still play our traditional 3-4-3, I don't know if some of you noticed, but early on when we were defending for dear lives, both AST and Aldair dropped, and it was definitely looking like a back five at times. But it was still ultimately when we would get forward, we'd shift kind of back into that 3-4-3 style that we've been kind of known for the rest of the end of the season.
Absolutely. I mean, Rob Vincent, you could tell he had a 15-minute like press, like he wanted to do run and gun at the early part to see where Rhode Island FC could be exposed in the early game there. Defending for their life felt kind of like the first half example. I felt AST was completely charged with keeping Junior 2 in his pocket for the night. And I think he did a great job of just tracking him. You could also tell that Rob Vincent's strategy in the early half of that game was going route one. And it seemed like, and we talked about this at length, we'll get into it in tactics here in a second, but we knew that the battle would be in the midfield for this game. And we knew that the Riverhounds, when you look at their season-long stats, one of the best things they had the ability to do was to win that second ball. I couldn't help but notice that it was like, we're going to go route one. We're going to go over the top. If we beat Rhode Island's defense, we're going to have a look at net. And if we don't, and we can't get that ball position, we're just going to redirect it back into the midfield where our secondary line is charging. And I don't think we won a lot of our second balls and our 50-50s in the midfield, especially in the first half, Maybe the reffing had something to do with that. We'll talk about that too. But we got to get back to this formation here for a second. This did not make sense when we saw it. And Torin, you're now a coach. Walk us through. What did you say? What did you think when you saw this lineup? Because I was flabbergasted, and I'll even say so much as a fan of the club, I think they're a fan of the podcast, but a fan of the club told me at the pre-watch party in Pittsburgh that when the lineup dropped, that if they had seen this lineup, they wouldn't have traveled to Pittsburgh. That's how depressed they were immediately upon seeing this. And I kind of said, hey, in Kano we trust. I had to do the supporting group mentality here. Like, it doesn't matter whatever we think at this point. We got to play this game. What did you think of this lineup? And help me make it make sense.
I think for me, when I'm trying to think of what Kano was trying to do here, I think his idea was to try and match Pittsburgh player for player. Pittsburgh, obviously, I think their bread and butter is their 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-3 shape. So I think Kano was just trying to completely match player for player. The issue that this had, and honestly, I think he probably would have been my man of the match. I think Eric Dick maybe would have got it, but it was Robbie Mertz. His ability to drop deep and create that three in the middle just killed us, because it left us with Ibarra and Baccarat against three players in that middle, and it just absolutely killed us. I was a bit surprised that we didn't see a change at halftime, because I think it felt pretty obvious that that's where we were being beat, seeing maybe Clay or Zach on. But I think the initial strategy wasn't a bad idea. Honestly, if you asked me to pick a lineup before the game, I would have done the same shape, probably had Dikwa instead of Quizera after his great performance the week before. But I definitely understand the shape of trying to go player for player. I do think if we go player, I know it's hard to say because we did lose. I do think if we go player to player, we are a better team individually. I think you've seen it game after game. The reason we lose against Pittsburgh are the tactics. It is the Pittsburgh's will to win, and that classic, obviously he wasn't there today, but that Bob Lilly strategy that we can't seem to beat. So I do actually get Kano trying to go player for player. I was just a bit surprised that when it clearly wasn't working at halftime, even though it was 0-0, that we didn't see a change. We didn't see Clay or Zach on the pitch to kind of give us that overload in the middle.
Yeah, I like last week we were thinking everything was going to be the same. It was more of like, does Aldair stay in or does Quizera come back? And so when I saw this,
historically, we've seen Kano reward the team that wins a continuation of that. We didn't see a lot of instances this year where the formation was stable, mostly to injury. And also there was so few wins, especially in the earlier half of the year, that we didn't see the formation typically carry over. He was constantly adjusting, constantly trying to do new things with the group that he had. But I thought, we talked offline and then we shared it online, I thought like Kano would be crazy to not run this hotter hand. You've now seen success in 2 playoff matches. And you're right. It was like, is it Quizera then because he's back from red card suspension, or does Sanchez get the nod?
And I think when I look at try and figure like, okay, what was coach trying to do here? I think part of it too, the decision to bring Ibarra in is because of he was a previous Riverhound. And I think he thought that maybe his familiarity with the system would give him a leg up on some of the other players. Hindsight 2020, maybe ultimately didn't work out, but I think there was opportunity to maybe change at halftime. But also at the same time, has Mark Ibarra ever been red carded before?
He has one other red card as a Riverhound back in 2022,
but not with RFC.
Not with RFC. He definitely, when he plays, he offers a stable presence. We've called him the garbage man since he came to the team. He's probably the most defensive minded of the 6s, 8s that we have in that double pivot or that midfield triangle. I don't disagree with that, but going back to this for a second, is that too much change? Because if we said Sanchez, Quizera, and then we did the devil's advocate of, does Chico get a start here? One, he had a tremendous breakout in his substitution minutes against North Carolina, killing that team off for forever. But then also we saw his performances against Pittsburgh earlier in the year, once when we didn't have JJ Williams available due to injury, another time when JJ got himself red carded off of the match. We saw Chico's ability to harass that back line, kind of being a jerk a lot of the time. So we thought, with this, and then again, to your point, another former Riverhound, would that be the direction you go? We don't see that. Instead, we see Mark play, and we got to talk about Mark for a second here. Didn't even play in the North Carolina game. ran the numbers on his minutes. He only has 104 minutes across the last 6 matches. He didn't play in 2 of those games, all in substitution roles. Like, how are you going to tell me, if I'm a fan that doesn't understand this, or I'm a player and go, hey, Clay Holstead, you're not playing in this match, even though you've played in every single game, you've been incredible for us all year. You're our best player by far in a lot of different ways. I need you to sit this out because Mark Ibarra just knows the Lily/Vincent system a little bit better. I don't know how you see that. And granted, Torin, I think you got it right. We'll go back to you here. He is good at man management decisions, but this felt like too much change. This felt like too much tinkering when you had already seen the success of this formula over the last 6 or 7 games. We only lost against New Mexico, otherwise unbeaten. That doesn't feel right. Make that make sense to me.
Yeah, I think, and this has, I think, a lot to do with what we were talking about earlier about certain players not being brought in the off season. And I think the phrase that I've used all season long is Kano, in a lot of places, is trying to fit square pegs into round holes. There's certain positions where we don't have the players for the way he wants to play, or we don't have this or this. So he's just trying to find someone that will do a job. I think AST is the biggest example of that at right wing back. I think Quizera playing as that more attacking sort of 10 in this game was that as well, because he's typically, your out and out winger. And I think for Kano, I think he just thought, I want to play with 2 defensive midfielders. Obviously, he was going to pick Hugo because he's easily been one of our best players, if not our best player at the end of the year. And I think he was just sick of playing a player that isn't quite used to the position. As you said, Mark Ibarra is possibly our most defensive midfielder. So I think his thought process was, I'm going to get someone in there who's not going to get sucked too far forward. He's going to stay back. He's going to be that stable presence. So even if, we get beat going forward and they go on the counter, we'll always have Hugo and Mark back, right, covering that back 3. I think the issue you had is that you just created this gap between Busan and Quizera, who are very high up the pitch because they are naturally attackers, and then these 2 very defensive midfielders. So there was just this big gap in between this midfield that I think players like Sample, who again, they got a great game as well, and Robbie Mertz were just taking way too much advantage of.
Yeah, and I want to be clear too, because I think I had 10 DMs in all of the accounts in the middle of the game, which I was not checking, asking why is Clay not starting, or how hurt is Clay that he can't start. I want to be very clear with everyone. He was 100% healthy. So this was a tactical decision that Kano decided to not utilize him as a starter. And then we'll get into why he only got to see 7 minutes in the final game of the season here in a bit. Jason, final thoughts on, is there anything left to unpack about the Ibarra decision? Because we also have to talk about the combination of Jojea and Aldair here for a second too.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing that I thought was interesting, and it can kind of tie into that next conversation there, was Zach Haribo had kind of made his way into this team and is, in this run of form had been playing a lot. And he'd been playing this interesting role where he's kind of part of the front 3, but being a kind of midfielder by trait, he would kind of fall back into the midfield. And in that regards, he could have maybe counterbalanced Robbie Mertz doing the same thing and really kind of bring some strength to that midfield. And we know at the same time that he does have ability to go forward and attack. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting choice. With leading into the Quizera and Aldair Sanchez part there, how there are flashes there where sometimes it looks like they're on the same wave, but there are other times where it still looks like that relationship maybe never really solidified. How
Torin pulled the stats. So Torin, walk us through what was the effective rate of Sanchez, because this wasn't the first game, and far from it. Actually, they played together a lot on the pitch this season. I know a lot of times people thought they were a like for like swap, but they definitely saw action on the pitch. But Torin, you've got those stats. What would you say was the effective rate of Jojea and Aldair combined on the season?
Yeah, so on the season, when both of them have started the game, not including different formations, a lot of different setups as we saw from Kano this year, the record was 3-3-4. So I think overall you can kind of see that the effectiveness isn't that great. You're losing more than you win. However, it is important to know that the last time and the only time that Rhode Island FC has beat Pittsburgh, which was of course away, both of them did start together. So I can kind of understand Kano wanting to start both of them. But the thing that I noticed going through, and I mentioned it slightly earlier, is that Kano has flipped and changed formations a lot. When we played Pittsburgh last time and won 1-0 in the Jägermeister Cup, we were not playing this 3-4-2-1. We were playing a 4-2-3-1. Aldair was your out-and-out left back. Quizera was your out-and-out left winger. So while, yes, they were both playing on the left side again this game, they were playing in two very different roles. And I think that is kind of the biggest issue I had with it, that I think Quizera, oftentimes both of them want to be wide. Sanchez wants to be wide so we can whip crosses in. Quizera wants to be wide so we can be his man down the line and then cut in. And I think the issue you had is that at all times, one of them was doing exactly what they wanted and was staying nice and wide, and the other was doing exactly what they don't want to do and was having to be playing in that kind of half space in the middle and trying to receive the ball with their back to goal. So I think there was a definite issue throughout the game where Quizera kept finding himself in the middle and he wanted to be in space to run forward, to run at his defender like he's been so good at, but he just kept finding himself in the middle, so he couldn't, take those big touches around his players and use his speed. So I think there was definitely an issue with that connection on the day.
I noticed a lot of JJ's passes down the left side I thought at the time were very poor, but then on the rewatch, to your point, Torin, it was almost as if he expected Jojea to be somewhere that Jojea failed to be able to get to. Either the pass was way too far in front and there was no one there, or the pass, he had tried to get too far forward and needed to slow things down. It could have been a combination. JJ could have just had some less than desirable passing on the night, but it did seem like it was something they were not as comfortable in because of the way that positioning worked. I don't think Jojea had necessarily the best of games. It's scary to think that might have been the last match. We just don't know those kinds of things yet. But it definitely seemed like there was some sort of lack of comfortability. I didn't notice a lot of overlaps, Jason. I don't know. I didn't see many Aldair overlap runs or overloads to that side. It was usually more how far could JJ get up and then turn it back around and recycle it back the other side if JJ wasn't a part of the buildup.
Yeah, I think I maybe only remember like one. I think the problem was that, like Torin was saying, they both kind of like to occupy the same space. So there was just a lot of awkward movement over there where they were just too close to each other because they're both kind of wanting to do very similar things.
Yeah. So let's get into this last part of the roster. So we now know what was played on the night. We know that it wasn't successful. We've kind of been talking about it as we've talked these tactics, but what was the overarching goal for Kano? Because, to Torin's point about switching to the man-to-man, I don't disagree with that. But that's not, that doesn't tell you the over picture of how are you trying to build your game plan for this. And I hate to say it, but and several fans asked in our DMs this week, they asked us, were we playing for extra time? Were we playing to try to turn it on as a second half team? And when you go this defensive out the gate and you make all these alterations compared to the success you'd seen in other matches so far, and Kano, if Kano was here right now, he would throw punches because he does not like being asked if he's not playing to win. And I think ultimately, yes, he was trying to play to win. He had some sort of tactic in mind, but what was that tactic? Because that did not look like necessarily a team that was trying to get an early goal and then take advantage of the team of Pittsburgh.
I mean, historically.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Torin, go.
Okay, I definitely agree with you. I think fans would be a little bit crazy for saying that he's not trying to win a game when we played statistically harder opponents before and played like we were going to win. I didn't think that was going to change in any way. I think it was more of, I think he was trying to beat Pittsburgh at their game. I think he was looking for a much more counterattacking side, because when you have that front three of Jojea, Noah, and JJ, it's a very quick, electric front three that when you regain possession and you can get that ball out quickly, Pittsburgh have a great back line, but I don't know if there's any back line that can, stop that level of speed and level of pace. But I do just think that in the end, the reason he got it wrong is I feel like just kept reverting to playing it out from the back. I think if we had a few times in that first half where we were going long to JJ and it was working, and I was like, okay, I can kind of understand where Kano's going. But I think it was a mix of that not working and us kind of just abandoning it too early. And, just overall it not working. I think JJ, he struggled a lot in the air, in my opinion. It is very tough. Pittsburgh have arguably one of the best defenses. They haven't conceded, and I think it was like 600 minutes. So obviously it was going to be a hard game for that front three nonetheless. But I think Kano was just trying to play for the counter and trying to essentially beat Pittsburgh at their game, which I don't hate the tactic. I don't think it was a bad idea. I just think on the night, Pittsburgh just had the right system and were the better team.
So then, Jason, do you think Kano suffers from, and I see Jason writing it in, overcomplicating. Do you think he tinkers too much with strategy at that point? Like, again, hindsight is a blessing and a curse. Would we have been better off not trying to tinker and just seeing the starting 11 from North Carolina play its game? Or did those adjustments need to happen and it just didn't quite work out for him?
You're right, hindsight 2020, but I also kind of think about this game, and sure, was the first half exciting? No, but I think we, for the most part, kind of kept ourselves in the game and kind of, to a certain extent, contained Pittsburgh. I think this game came down to moments that, to a certain extent, didn't fall in our favor. Not to say that we played well enough to actually get the win, but, if Marky Barra doesn't make that challenge and we keep all 11 on the field, like, what does that look like full time? And that goal was a bit of magic. That was a actually legit good goal. So there's not a lot I would fault on any of our back line there. Sure, it's just stats, but the XG is pretty even. Technically, we're actually just a tiny bit ahead. So
the stats will say that we were a better team on the night, but that's why stats aren't what win games, and you have to actually watch the game to enjoy it.
So in that regards, could we have been sitting here having a conversation about how Kano is a tactical genius, right? if things worked out his way.
And I think to sort of chime back into the people as well who kind of say that Kano got it wrong, he switched too much. I think when you look at the feedback that people have given Kano in the other games we played Pittsburgh, it's that we play two possession based, we play two attacking. That we know this season we've struggled to play against a low block, and there is literally statistically no better team in a low block than the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. So as much as you want to say that maybe it was too defensive and maybe we shouldn't have gone for the counterattack, I think if we had tried to play out from the back and slowly build the ball up and then try and score deep into the team's final third, I think that game would have ended a lot worse than it did, if I'm being honest. I think that scoreline would not have been 1-0. And we saw it in the first game we played Pittsburgh away this season in the 2-0. Yes, there was a red card later in that game, but we lost to 11 men because of that reason. We were trying too much to play it too carefully. We're trying to nice tiki-taka. We make the joke that Kano loves Pep Guardiola and playing like that. And I think you saw it perfectly in that game. And I think Kano was trying to learn from that game and go, you know what? We're not going to make the same mistake. We're going to try and be counterattacking. We're going to try something different. And I think to knock him for trying something different against a team that we've struggled against throughout our whole history, I think that's kind of crazy.
I'm not going to argue that point because I'm not sure I'm capable in this moment in time of defending it in an intelligent way. But I will argue that regardless of where I would want to go, it doesn't feel good to say that Kano had to do these things or that they were even the right things to do, and then as a collateral damage, that means Clay Holstead is relegated to a bench position. Like, that doesn't feel good. It feels very similar to us and how we signed Maxi Rodriguez and just continue to fall deeper and deeper down the impact role responsibility chart. And so it's alarming when you think about the fact that if that's what we needed to win and our team needs to win without Clay Holstead on the pitch, that should never be a statement that's said out loud. And it bugs me that we would even have to go down that road, because that's my problem with it is if these were the decisions, how are we setting ourselves up for 2026 in a role where Clay Holstead would be a sub, and a very last minute sub at that? I don't know about that. And looking at the bench too, we were standing there and it was every one of these players used to be a starter for us. It was Grant Stoneman. Now he's going through injuries. So okay, I get it. Maxi Rodriguez was supposed to be the promised one. He was, the Harry Potter, the Anakin Skywalker of this team. Zach Harivo was at one point the lock-on starter. Jackson Lee is our starter when Koke Vegas isn't healthy. And then Chico was the other promised one. The only player that was in our subs was Dwayne Atkinson, who you would say, like, yeah, your role on this team is to be a sub impact player. And it just feels weird. And I thought our bench was going to be depth for us, and I think they were in a lot of ways. We just didn't have enough time with them on the pitch. But it just feels weird that we could live in a world where Clay Holstead is in that role, and I don't like it. That's not a world I want to live in. That's not a world I want to live in. But we got to move on. I want to talk about these keepers. I think both keepers deserve a tip of the hat. Fantastic work from both of them. Koke with some of the best saves of his season. Definitely kept us in this game in a lot of different ways. And then Eric Dick, season high of 5 saves. Fun fact about Dick, he not only did he have the highest saves of his 2025 season, but he tied his highest saves with another match where he had 5 saves. And that was also against Rhode Island back when they visited us at Centerville Bank Stadium. So Eric Dick seems to have Rhode Island FC's number. Maybe it's not that the Riverhounds have it. Maybe it's not that Bob Lilly or the ghost of Bob Lilly is what had it. Maybe it's just been Eric Dick this whole time and we didn't understand it. Because, Jason, you said a second ago, we had higher XG, we had higher total shots on target. Like, you would think then that's what would win the game, and Eric Dick was like, hold my beer. That's not happening tonight. So I think both keepers were definitely the talking points of this. Jason, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, he made a few phenomenal saves there. We actually did create some good opportunities kind of out of nothing. But Eric Dick does what Eric Dick does, and he just makes
you
some
can drop the Eric.
saves.
We're not the broadcast team. You can just say Dick do what Dick do. Torin, what do you got?
Yeah, I think for me, and I don't care what the USL Championship best 11 of the season says, these are the 2 best keepers in the league, in my opinion. And I think the biggest thing for me with Eric Dick is his clutchness. It feels like any time the Riverhounds are in a tight game, he plays his best game, and it's honestly incredible to watch. And I wouldn't swap Koke for the world, but Eric Dick is a fantastic player, and as he said, once again, he was just an absolute thorn in our side all game long.
Yeah. Moving on, I want to just do a quick comparison. I mentioned at the beginning, Augie Williams just harassing our back line, giving Hamidi a just difficult time on that right side, but really just finding places to run at speed and not let Rhode Island play that higher line at times. But what I noticed about Augie Williams is it didn't necessarily feel or seem like his goal was to be made available to take a look at goal. It did happen a few times through transition, but like I said earlier, it felt like Williams's entire responsibility was to redirect headers back towards the center to oncoming Pittsburgh players. On the other side of things, R. Williams and JJ Williams was fighting for his life between Edric and Suber all night. A lot of times, I mean, he was still bringing down balls, but for the most part, a lot of the times just redirecting it and kind of resetting possession back towards the Riverhound side. We argued at length that the midfield was going to be where the battle was. What is it about this game that Williams couldn't emulate the same? JJ couldn't emulate the same type of tactic as Augie, in the sense of just, I just don't feel like we won many balls in the middle of the pitch on redirects. I don't think we got a lot of 50-50. I'd have to check the aerial and the ground duels on that. It felt like Augie knew his role was not to even look at net, and I feel like Williams is like, I'm going to take this team on my shoulders and try to find a way to score.
Oftentimes it looked like JJ was trying to direct the attack forward, and it just didn't feel like.
But there was no one there.
Support.
Yeah,
and so I don't know if the expectation was that either Noah Quizera was supposed to come off that back line and just kind of use the speed to try and catch them unaware. But it just didn't really work out. And then later on, the tactic kind of changed, and we actually saw a lot of dribbling from JJ. He's like, I'm just going to take this team on the back of and just see what I can do. Yeah.
After the red card, it definitely seemed like him and Hugo were like, listen, we're just going to take this ball as far as we can on our own power and then see what happens. Torin, any thoughts on that, or do you want to move on?
No, I think for me, the big difference was the movement. I think I was so impressed with Augie Williams' movement. I think we've said so many times in the show that when you have a physical, striker that plays against us, if they look at Karifa Yao and decide they're going to get into a battle with him, they will lose. every single time, because if there's one thing Karifa Yao is good at, it is throwing around strikers. And I think Augie Williams did well to kind of go, you know what? I'm not going to be the big man in this. I'm going to move away from him. I'm going to find those gaps, and found Diop, who's obviously a fantastic player, but he's not that kind of physical presence. He's not someone who's going to bully you. And so Augie Williams, is kind of hanging off of that, left-hand side for us, doing really a job. Where I think JJ was trying a bit too much to fight. I think it was Subert in the middle. And again, Subert is another one of those players that if you try and, physically beat him, 9 times out of 10, you're going to lose that battle.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason he's on the first team for the Riverhounds this season, USL all team, first team. Want to get into the actual contact, the physicality. I think this is a great transition. We knew Rhode Island FC was going to be physical in this game, and I saw it in. I had one opinion when I watched the game live, and then I had another opinion when I did the rewatch. I want to start things off, and Jason, we'll open up with you. Was this a situation of bad reffing? Because I know I almost hate to even ask the question, because it feels like it's a storyline we've brought up too many times in the USL, and we know that the reffing needs to improve. But was this bad reffing? Was this soft fouls being called in general, or was this the Riverhounds flopping? Because I will say, on the initial experience, it felt like a gust of wind was going to knock a Riverhounds player down, and we know historically Rhode Island players will not fall unless gravity is consuming their lives. Which one was it, or was it a combination of any of them?
I think it's probably actually a little bit of all of it. I think, like what you mentioned about the rewatch, when you go back and look at a lot of the major calls, he did getting, I think, the majority of those right. At the same time, there was a lot of soft fouls that just, like you said, felt like a gust of wind came over and a Riverhound player just fell over. So, and I think that, we've seen this too many times. Like, unfortunately, we get taken advantage of that because we play physical. And like you said, we don't go down unless, gravity turns up or something. It's the DNA of this team. We fight through challenges. We keep trying to move forward and continue with the ball. And often it feels like, unfortunately, we get kind of taken advantage of for that.
17 tackles for the Riverhounds, 17 tackles for Rhode Island, 9 tackles for Pittsburgh, 14-1, 7-1 for Riverhounds, 14 fouls then, though, to Riverhounds having 10. So, that immediately tells you, even if you didn't watch the game, we were coming in hot a lot more often. The yellow cards technically dead even, 3 to the Riverhounds, and then 4 or 3 plus a red if you want to count how Marks was converted. Torin, what did you see from this game, from the overall game management? What goes through your mind when you see refs kind of put this kind of approach to the game?
I think Jason nailed it on the head, if I'm going to be honest. I think at the beginning of the season, it would really frustrate me watching the USL refs, who I think are oftentimes very soft, and they will let a lot, they will call a lot of challenges. But it's come to a point now where I feel like I'm used to it, sadly. And I think that, honestly, as much as I love the fact that we have this gritty mentality, maybe it's time to change, because not once have I seen it work in our favor. I think when you have a ref like this, who you kind of know going into it is going to call a lot of the soft fouls, and you're putting in these really, really hard challenges when they're kind of unnecessary, I'm trying to think from a tactical perspective, is that really the best mentality you have going into it? I love it. I love the fact that we're on a team that, is a dive club, as many Defiance members would say. But at the same time, it's not really helping us win games, is it? So maybe that's something that we might need to think about for next season.
Do you remember when the NFL had to finally admit that there was headhunters in the league that were going out just to hurt players? I wonder if we could get the internal media for all of these organizations, because they record everything, right? I wonder if there's tapes of Rob Vincent talking to his team before this game and going, if Karifa Yao even looks at you mean, I want you down on the ground and wincing in pain. I wouldn't be surprised if they say make a meal of it, and if the refs are agreeing with it, agree with it. Now, to Nabil's credit, I think he got all the calls right. We'll talk about Mark's double yellows here in a second. But again, I do think that it was when players came together in the 50-50s. I didn't see. I don't care if you get it right all the time, but then be consistent in your right or be consistent in your wrong. It felt like when Rhode Island FC players did fall down, we didn't get the same grace that Pittsburgh players got, especially more in the first half than the second half. I think after the red card, the game completely just got away from everybody in a lot of ways. Listen, as far as I'm concerned, we need to put a petition in, and we need Natalie Simone to ref every single one of our playoff matches moving forward, and that's all there is to it. Because if we had Natalie, we wouldn't have gotten Mark off. I don't think. I think he would have stayed on.
She usually lets the boys play.
Got to let the boys play. But let's talk about Mark Ibarra. Jason, we talked at the half, and we sat there and said, if you're Coach Connor Smith right now, what adjustments do you need to make in this 0-0? You've held on. You're right where you want to be in enemy territory. What do you want to do? And the only thing we agreed on was that Mark Ibarra needed to come off at halftime because he was sitting on a yellow. He was the defensive pivot, and you had other capable midfielders who now, if they needed to play, 60, 90 minutes of additional soccer, they could put it on the legs and they could manage it. And you had like for like swaps or improvements technically at that point. Doesn't happen. Game starts. Robbie Mertz gets the go-ahead goal, and it was a great goal. I didn't realize there was a bit of a deflection until I watched the replay. I thought it was just it was in the opposite corner all the way across the pitch. But Robbie Mertz gets the go-ahead goal, and then just minutes later, Ibarra is off. Let's talk about it. Why did Mark Ibarra? I mean, we know Karifa Yao is the reason Mark Ibarra was sent off, but why didn't he substitute in a knockout game? And one of your players is on a yellow, and you have all this depth in that one particular role available to you.
I think part of it was that, like, tactically, I think part of the idea with the game was to like get to that 60, 70th minute and then go from there. Right. Historically, this is a second half team. And then we also kind of talked about, even though, at the time I was like, yeah, take him out, get Clay in there. Generally, Ibarra is that player you can trust to kind of keep a cool head and, like as we say, be the garbage man, just kind of clean up all the trash in that midfield and recycle the ball and just keep the game flowing. Didn't really expect him to get sent off, even though he did get carded early. So it was more, I think that was kind of what triggered me to think we're playing with fire here. I imagine coach maybe wanted to take him off in a few minutes. Like, who knows? Like maybe he was prepping to have him subbed out at the 60th minute, or what it was, 65th or whatever.
Yeah, but you're already down a goal. Like, that's the other thing. If you don't want to bring him off at the 45th, you're down a goal at the 55th, and the next subs don't happen for like 8 or 9 minutes. And like, yeah, you could say, well, they had to go down and warm up on the corner. They were warming up through the entire halftime. Like that's what the subs do, while the rest of the team goes to the locker room, as they stay out on the pitch and they continue to warm up in the event that they need to come on. So you can't say that the alternates were cold. So Torin, make this make sense.
So, I mean, to first respond to that, I think you always, I feel that you always learn as a coach that you can't be too reactive. And I think by making a sub right after the goal so many times, that can be described as too reactive. I think, especially when you have this setup with two very defensive, sixes, two very defensive midfielders. If you take him out and bring in Clay, those first 5 minutes is when Pittsburgh is going to be on you the most. They've got the momentum, they're feeling great. And if you kind of make that immediate sub, I think that's when you start to see the cracks. And I think it's oftentimes you see teams scoring twice in 5 minutes because there are these reactive subs. I think maybe not immediately, but maybe give it 10 minutes. And it's funny that you mentioned the fact that you said that you needed to take Ibarra off at halftime, because I've brought receipts at halftime at 12:36. I messaged Diego saying Ibarra off purely because he's on yellow. So I brought the receipts from Instagram. So all I'm saying, but yeah, I definitely agree. I think he definitely should have gone off at the half, and I think maybe you would have switched the formation then, because you don't have that defensive six. You maybe would have brought on both Clay and Zach to make that kind of midfield three we were talking about, and maybe looked at Noah or Quizera coming off, or even putting Quizera back at left wing back. But I definitely think that in that sense, I think Kano probably got it wrong. But it's a tough one. I think and I think you mentioned earlier that the ref maybe wouldn't have given that had it have been someone else. I've looked at it back. I think it is a yellow. It's a tough one because he does win the ball, but when you go in studs up like that, every ref is going to give it. And honestly, part of me respected the ref for being consistent. Where I think there's so many refs who, because it's a red card, the second yellow, they won't give it. But at the end of the day, a yellow card's a yellow card. And in my opinion, that was the right decision.
Yeah, I agree. It was the second yellow. I won't take away from that. It sucks because the first yellow, I mean, it was also a yellow, but it was tugging. It wasn't like he laid him out. I think all the yellows were actually soft, but not worthy of yellow. Like JJ arguing about some of his the formality of how the game was going. I want to ask you a question then, Jason, based on what Torin just said. I don't disagree about the reactiveness, but in playoff soccer, when it's not table soccer, do you almost need every minute at that point though? Or does Torin have a good point there?
No, I think he makes a good point there. And like, also, how many goals have we scored after like the 70th minute? Right?
I thought you were going to ask how many goals have we scored against the Riverhounds, but okay, yeah.
Not very many, but if we kind of look at the bigger picture of how this team kind of finds its goals, that I don't think there was any need to panic there. It's just 1-0. And I think that it probably was something like give it 10 minutes and I'll make some changes to really go for it.
We'll talk about the subs here in just a second. The last two things I want to say. One is I appreciated the fan that was standing in front of us with his son who had overheard our conversation and turned around and just like not yelled. He had to yell because it was so loud. But he's like, why didn't Kano listen to you guys? And we're like, we've asked ourselves this all season in reference to Mark. But I guess I want to ask the sadder question here. Do you think we've seen the last of Mark Ibarra as a Rhode Island FC player? And are we okay with him going out on an ejection as he was a sleeper agent for the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, according to the Steel Army?
I'm saying, first of all, if we do lose Ibarra and he goes to Pittsburgh, USL investigate that because there's something going on there. But honestly,
Torin, I had someone reach out in email and ask me to do research on Nabil. Was it Nabil Salah? I forget his last name, but ask if he had any ties to Pittsburgh, to the team, if he had done like academy work. And I looked it up because I thought they had known something.
Just in case.
So I did his entire like background. He's from Indiana, so there's no ties that I could find. But if someone out there wants to tell me otherwise, and that Nabil Mo Salah is actually a sleeper agent for the Riverhounds, let me know and we'll get this overturned immediately. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just needed to say that out loud.
No, all good. And I mean personally, I really hope it's not the last we see of Mark Ibarra, whether he doesn't plays well or doesn't play well. To me, he's always someone that brings just a very load of passion. He plays for the badge, and he's someone that last season was so important for us. And I know that obviously you have to move on and kind of go through those losses, but it definitely hurts. But you mentioned earlier, and I've just pulled it up, but until this game, Mark Ibarra was on the bench for 7 straight games, and in those 7 games, we only lost once. So it is a possibility of maybe Mark Ibarra doesn't fit this team anymore. I think when you see the emergence of our Lord and Savior Hugo Bacharach, I think it is definitely a possibility that he kind of takes that role. And I think, we saw it last year. We talked so much about throughout the season about that, fabled midfield three of Zach, Clay, and Mark. And I think we saw almost an improvement on that when Hugo replaced Mark. So who knows? Maybe as much as you don't want to see it, I think it's more likely that this could be the last time we see Mark Ibarra.
Yeah, I think there's a good possibility. Mark's always been great for the team, right? He really puts in a shift, but I think it is a good point that with, Hugo kind of really finding his form in the midfield there and kind of being that really attacking presence, but also like the destroyer at the same time. You wonder, does he have a place in the future? I think it'll really come down to when Kano sits down and starts to envision how does this team look next year? Will he be able to sit there and kind of pick and say, like, these guys I need because they fit the system. I'm going to make some slight tweaks to the system for next year.
We talked about this at length on the ride home. I'm still not sure if Kano's a systems guy or if he's a players guy, and then he just works the players that he has into a system he wants versus like actually finding the players for the system that he's supposed to have. I don't know.
Yeah, we said that old saying, you've put in square pegs in round holes. I think you've said it perfectly there. I think as much as, Marky is a great player, and if we could change the system, so who knows? But I think the most we'd see Mark as would be a Hugo backup, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably a little bit of both, and part of that just comes down to, like, I know the whole square peg round hole thing, but at the same time, you kind of need some flexibility in regards to backup. But maybe that's why, if anything, Mark would kind of fall to the wayside here, because he really doesn't do anything else in that regards, right? He is just an out and out 6, whereas Hugo you can put in the back. Clay you could probably put anywhere on the field. Similarly with Zach. Zach's been up front. He's been in the middle.
Say the same with Maxi, if you wanted to fight that one too.
Don't forget ASD.
Yeah, and then having those players with that incredible flexibility maybe isn't always the best, but it really gives you a lot of wiggle room when it comes, especially with all the injuries we suffered.
Yeah, you have to be a world beater at that point to be a purist, and I think in this league, you literally have to be the best version of that every team wants for you to be really good at just one thing at this particular league. So we got to move on, though. Want to talk about this game kind of seemed to flip on its head once we go down, and a lot of people online were talking about how suddenly there was kind of like the fear was gone because you had to play fearless because everything was on the line. Some people said that Mark going down and finally starting to see some of the substitutes come on was the game changer, and then some said that, hey, Pittsburgh had the go-ahead goal. We talked about this. They had one of the best defenses in the league. They don't have to prove anything at this point, and Rhode Island's now down a man. Like, they have to come to us, so they started dropping even lower in that block. The press was basically turned off at that point in the game from the Riverhounds side of things. Which one of these things, again, I'm going to ask, which one of these things was the major attribute, or was it a combination of things? And Torin, we'll start with you.
You caught me mid-water sit there. No, I think part of it was the realization from Rhode Island FC being like, oh, we could go out. Like, I think that's obviously part of it. But I mean, I think Pittsburgh were, in essence, jumping for joy. I mean, this game couldn't have gone perfectly for them. They went 1-0 up, and then 5 minutes later, Ibarra got sent off. And we've said it before, they're the best team in the league at sitting back and, right in that low block. And now they get to do it against 10 men. Like, Bob Lilly, wherever he was sitting watching, he was jumping for joy, because that's exactly the way that Pittsburgh want to play in the end of the day. And I think mostly it was Pittsburgh sitting back and kind of, letting us attack. But I also do think that it was a realization from the players of, we need this. We need a goal rather than we want one.
I think that you could really see the body language on our players really go for it. And you could see, like, the hunger for them to try and get themselves back into the game. I guess the frustrating thing is that it's like, could we have tried it earlier? Maybe not against this team, but, a little bit of little too late in the game for us to really kind of make an impact, especially with only 10 men.
Should we be asking ourselves, should Kano have been letting these guys play like that from the get-go, or was that part of the managed minutes and again, another combination of a lot of things not working towards Rhode Island FC's favor? But like, I did hear fans talking in the stands, was like, where was this intensity 20 minutes ago? Where was this in the 35th minute from an attacking side of thing? And then, the default, especially when you're watching the game live, is like, well, Chico's now on the pitch and he's doing a lot more work than maybe Noah and Jojea combining was doing. Maxi's now on the pitch, creating a lot of new outlets. Again, Hugo suddenly no longer was in this reserve defender role. I mean, he was finally taking the ball up the pitch himself. Even Frank was getting into it at points. It felt like they were given the permission suddenly because they were behind. Maybe that's part of that reactionary stuff, Torin, we were talking about. But like, should this team have been playing like that from the onset, or was that not what allowed them to play like that until they got stuck in that red card moment?
Probably a little bit of both. I think realistically, I don't think this team has the legs to play that way for a full 90. Like that's just, like madness, heavy metal clop ball, right? Like they get worn out. They couldn't do that. I mean, maybe Amos Shapiro Thompson, because he doesn't seem to stop like a Energizer Bunny practically, but I mean, even he probably has his limits. So, and then the reality is we haven't done well against them, with the exception of that one game. So at the same time, like you can't discredit him too much for trying something different to really find a way to actually best this team.
I mean, it's just frustrating. JJ gets the best look of the night on a breakaway. Chico traps down a ball, equally puts himself into a dangerous position, creates the outside the box, and it was not a penalty for people that were like, that was a penalty. That was not a penalty.
It went really fast, and I think at live reaction, I kind of thought maybe it could have been, but you go back and check it. It's like, yeah, no, he was outside.
Joe puts a dangerous ball on frame, and then Noah late into the game starts looking dangerous with some shots. It's like suddenly all of these players got a little sharper, got a little tighter, a little crispier, and like I thought we could get a goal back. I thought that there was an opportunity. It just didn't manifest. Torin, when you look at the substitute model and the overall game management, despite the red card, which obviously no coach intentionally plans for, how do you rank what Kano's tactics were on the night as you looked at those subs deploy?
Yeah, I think honestly, if anything, it's actually hard to look past that red because that completely changed the game. Because when you look at the way that Kano normally subs, that 60, 65th minute is typically his kind of when he brings on one or two players. And you saw it against Charleston when he brought on Atkinson. That's where he kind of flips the game on its head, and Ibarra goes and gets himself sent off in the 60th minute. So right when you kind of Kano is used to kind of, all right, we're going to turn it up a notch. We're going to bring the heat now. They're down to 10 men. But I do think that the issue is, I think, in a way, and I think so many people have said it, and I think Diego said it earlier as well in the comments, but it was too set in his way of making those subs in that 60, 65th minute. Because had he have made one or two subs at halftime, I think that second half is completely different.
Do you call halftime subs reactionary then? Because to kind of counter what you said a second ago, is that an appropriate time? Like, because Kano historically, I don't think makes halftime subs. I can't name him off the top of my head. It feels like he always has to get to that 65th minute before the action starts, whether he's being the first coach to deploy subs or he's finally being a coach that does deploy his subs. Is halftime game management reactionary then, or is that an appropriate time and an appropriate window for a game like this?
I think in a way it's more reactionary than waiting for the 60th minute. But I think it's much easier for me looking at the broadcast. I think that was kind of the benefit of looking at it because you can see the game so much easier. It was so obvious that we needed a third man in the middle. And it just felt like it was like the game was crying out that if we just got that third man, we could go that kind of man-for-man system that Kana wanted. So from my perspective, I definitely think that a halftime substitute would have been the right way to go about it. But it definitely is more reactionary than what Kana is used to. And I think and again, it's a good and a bad thing to not be reactionary because, I said it earlier and you caught me out, but I thought it was a good thing that he wasn't reactionary after the goal. But at the same time, had he been more reactionary at halftime, maybe we'd be talking about going into a USL Championship final right now.
I mean, the silver lining here is my bank account is better off for it. I think a lot of you made the joke right afterwards.
Oh, yeah, I just saved a bunch by switching to the off season.
Yeah. So, I mean, notwithstanding, obviously wanted to get to that final. Jason, do you agree with Torin, or do you think that Connor needed to do a little bit more here and get out of that structured, 65th, 70th minute substitution marker?
If I had to take a guess, I'd say maybe he goes with that 60, 65 kind of marker where he uses the halftime to kind of maybe give some instructions, make some tweaks, and then give the actual team like, hey, you guys basically have 15, 20 minutes to show me you can implement what I think is the problem. And if not, I'm going to bring on other players who will. I still think that maybe being a little more reactive could have, I'm not going to say like got us the win, but maybe kept 11 men on the field in that regards, and maybe really given us an opportunity to, at least maybe take it a little further.
We'll never know. And that's the sad part. So finally, kind of ending things here on the reflection of the game itself. Who was your hero and who was your zero of the game? I can start. I think the easy hero here is, I really think that Koke is the reason that not only did we get this far in the playoffs, but the reason we got this far into the ability to make the playoffs as he returned from his injuries. So for this match, he's my hero. My zero, and I don't mean to call you out on it, I just don't think Jojea was as effective as what we wanted. And again, looking into last week, if we think about how we had Aldair, winger or not, like it just didn't seem like the strategy worked on the night, and we didn't get the offensive production. He didn't offer anything really on the midfield defensive side of things of a worthy note. And then Aldair seemed to suffer from it too, because he was just playing defense all night. So like we didn't really get to move up that for the first time ever, looking at the stats, we didn't really move up the left wing effectively. The right wing was actually the more dominant channel for the attack creation, which is surprising considering both of our left players, and then Hamidi kind of tagging in there, didn't really have a lot of effectiveness there. Maybe that was Suber's responsibility. He contained them well. I'm not quite sure, but I would say my hero is Koke. My zero on this one would be probably Jojea. How about you, Jason?
I mean, it's hard to argue against any other hero than Koke, especially, when the zero, it's a score line.
You cannot be neutral on this.
No, but for real, it's kind of been the crux of this team, right? This team can defend for days. We've really struggled to score. And I think that ultimately that was kind of our ultimate downfall, was our inability to find a goal in front of net. As dumb as it sounds, but it's been the kind of crux of this team.
Torin?
My hero, I think someone who is incredibly underrated, and I get why, obviously, you go and you lose a playoff final. I think people are not really interested in analyzing the game like we are, but I thought Emma Thompson was incredible. I think Junior Atsu is a fantastic wing back, and he's so good attackingly. And I thought AST was on him all game, winning the ball back. And I think easily he won that battle by far. I think he maybe didn't offer as much in attack, but I think that's purely because I think definitely Kano said to him, let's not go too far forward because you don't want to leave Etsu all that space in behind. My zero, I'm going to go with JJ. And I don't think a lot of it is on him personally. I think that, and this is the thing that I think I've said for the whole season, whether it's the fan base or whether it's the coaches, we rely on JJ way too much. There's this, and I've said it so many times when he was injured. JJ he wasn't a player, he was a phenomenon when he was injured. JJ was our Lionel Messi, and I think people were acting like he was that. And I think both from a fan base perspective, I think people view him as being this savior, which no one player can truly do that to a team. But also I think the strategies in this game a lot of it was kind of focused on him winning his one-on-one battles and him winning against that back three. And you asked him to do a very tough job against that back three. So I think it's not really on him, but he is my zero for this match.
I mean, you could argue though too, and rightfully so. I mean, in last year's postseason, he put up 5 goals, and in the string of games that we were on, he had almost back-to-back hat tricks. I think he accumulated like 7 or 8 goals in 5 games. So like, I do think that some people, especially if they were just fans that were kind of reconnecting with last season's postseason run, like, oh yeah, I know JJ Williams, he scored a bunch of goals for us, and then to kind of see him, not really deliver on that. I bet you there were expectations from the fan base, whether that was rightfully placed or not, to say like, JJ, why aren't you doing this thing for us again that you did last season. So I mean, there was a drop off. You can't deny it, whether that's, related strictly to JJ himself, or if it was more of like his responsibility, his role in the team, like you were saying a second ago, Torin. Like, I could see it both ways. I mean, we could talk at length about the drop off on all of our offensive production this year. I mean, Frank was our second highest scoring player last season. I will remind everyone of that. And I don't think a defender. I have to. I'll pull the stats, but we'll talk about it at some point. But like, I don't know how many defender goals we got, because we all know we didn't get any set piece or corner kick goal conversions this year in a meaningful way. So, I think calling JJ a 0, he's going to fight you for it. So you better hope he never gets transferred over to your side of the world. But like, I understand why you would say it. I don't like. It's like saying Clay deserved to be in this game for 7 minutes. Saying JJ deserved a 0 status, it feels weird, but I understand.
Just to quickly, I've pulled up the stat. In the USL Championship, I'm not counting Hugo because he's more of a midfielder. A defender, we did not have a single defender score a goal in the USL Championship this season.
I was hoping that like Zach Caravo, when he was masquerading as a right center back for a game, might have.
Well, he does have 2.
I know he has 2. I know he had the deflection goal, and I don't know what else he had. So it's like, I really hope.
Out and out defenders.
Yeah, that's tough.
0.
By the way, on the hero side of things, AST, I watched him win 2 headers in that match. So for all you short kings out there, there's a will, there's a way. All right, let's get to the hardest question of the night. Was the season a success? I've got thoughts, but I don't want to lead this conversation. So one of you brave souls has to start it off.
You know what? I know, Jason, that's all you. I don't want to start.
I mean, I don't really either, but someone's got to do it. Like, it depends how you measure success. I think if you didn't watch the season and you just looked at some of the numbers, second year in a row, we made it to the Eastern Conference Final. In our second year, we opened our brand new stadium, and we had a lot of high attendances. I think in that regards, it was a successful year. Now, if you're a fan who watches every single game, I think this was in some ways tough. And maybe some of us were wrong to have the expectations that we did. But we were, for a long period of time, the lowest scoring team. Like, I mean, Miami had scored more than us. It wasn't always easy to watch this team play. And I think that we've talked about this a few times throughout the season, and I know a lot of other fans share the similar sentiments. It's not always about winning per se in regards of the entertainment value, right? There were some games where, like, if we would have lost 3-2, at least we scored 2 goals. And hey, maybe one of those could have got us free chicken sandwich or something. Like, like it felt like there was a lot of soccer that was just like, I've seen this one before. we're gonna defend for our lives. We're gonna give up one we're gonna miss time one tackle, and then they're getting behind and they're gonna score some crappy goal. And then we're going to throw the kitchen sink at them and we're going to get nothing. It's going to be, just another one of those. And because we are such great at defending, we wouldn't give up any others, but it just never felt like we were going to score at times. So yes and no, I'd say.
I don't like that answer. Give me one or the other.
I'll go with yes because I think that a lot of other teams would have loved to go to an Eastern Conference Final, even if sometimes it wasn't always as fun.
I'll go next because I want Matt to be the decider. Because I'll say straight out of the gate, my answer is no. Because I want Matt. I'm putting the pressure on you for the raising anchor 3. You're going to give a collective answer. For me, again, I think it depends on how you view success. I'm going to talk on the pitch because I think JT did a great summary about off the pitch. I think off the pitch, and with the new stadium and the fan base. But for me, success this season was improvement. I said it from early on in the season, I wanted us to do better than sixth, and I wanted us to do well in the playoffs and do better in the Jägermeister Cup. In the Jägermeister Cup, we did great, and that's full respect. We got all the way to the semifinals. So in that case, we did better. To read you off some pretty bad stats this season, on every major stat, we were worse than last year, and less goal difference. So for me, my measure of success was improvement, and we quite literally in every metric were worse. So I can't say that it was a success. I don't think it was a total failing off team. We are incredibly tough to play against, and to end the season like this, I think is great and it makes you feel good. But I think when you're trying to be as objective as possible, if we go out in that first round of Charleston, say the season is a success, are probably switching their vote and saying that it's not a success. So for me, judging on what I said at the beginning of the season was a success, I'm going to say no.
We expected this to not be a victory, and that we are exactly where we should be. To your point,
Sure.
listen, it is hard to answer this. I'm glad Torin so readily just jumped right in and said, "No, we were not a successful club." I think back to him and said, "Hey, you've got some big expectations on your shoulders. People are, clamoring for you to run it back." And I remember him coming right up to us and saying, "I do not define success for this club on doing something that only by where we were, only 4 teams get to advance to. There are other milestones that this facilities that, making their new stadium their home. I'm not talking about the fan experience. I'm talking about the players getting comfortable playing on a new pitch, getting comfortable playing with themselves in those spaces where there was no transition knowledge coming from Bern, right? Like, there was a lot of things that Connor wanted to see in your head coach, and he was very intent in saying, the goal, I think, for them, the realistic goal was playoffs. But there was never like if we fail to get to the USL Cup final, again, or we don't win at all, like, are we a failure? He wasn't going to live or die by that expectation. And I think you're right in the sense of, if you look at it on paper, if you look at it as a casual, in a lot of ways, from a financial model and from everything that's going on. Where I'm going to give the flowers is, you do have to respect that we made it to the Eastern Conference final. Last week's show, I said it was Tampa, and that was correct. Made it to a Western Conference final in their first 2 years of operation. In the USL Championship era, Tampa did it under like the USL Pro or National. They did it in one of those. So you can't deny that, right? Like, whether we got there kicking and screaming, we did accomplish something that only one other club in the history of the championship era of USL has done. So that deserves it. And I will literally not score a single penalty in a shootout in the Jägermeister Cup. We were the best team in the Jägermeister in both the group stage and into the knockout rounds. And I think that we have to recognize and respect the hard work that the team put in to get to that point. The year before, so for Torin stats, he needs to update that, because we did do something better one time.
There's one.
But, and I say this with a big but, I think Torin's also right about looking at the on-field success, and this is a performance-based game. This is a metrics-based organization. This is a results-required kind of parameter, and that is one of the most important things you have to look at. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of what Torin just said because I'm just going to assume he's right. But I did look up that the way you build the community around here for the casuals and for the people that are soccer curious is you have to put an entertaining product out. Last year, Connor Smith made one promise that you would always have an entertaining product to watch at Burn. He didn't promise goals. He didn't promise wins, but he said it would always be entertaining. Now, I look at the casual fan would do it. You just said a second ago, if a game was 3-2, they're walking away with like, wow, that was crazy. That was something to behold. So here's some new stats that we can introduce. And for everyone that's drinking from the Depresso Espresso here, we had the third lowest offense, tied with Miami for third worst offense in the regular season. I knew that, 29 goals, but then I went and opened up Pandora's box, 12 goals at Centerville Bank Stadium in the regular season this year. And when you think about that, 12 goals, 14 games, you go, okay, that's like 0.5 of those 12. The other 7 games we got, I think it was 6 games actually, we got 1 or 2 goals. We only had multi-scoring goals in 2 games, and then we had 7 shutouts where we did not score a goal in front of fans. That is disastrous. And on that stat alone, I would say needs to do better. They need to find a way to find the back of the net at home. They need to be a better team at home. And while the record was better at home, because a lot of those were like 0-0 draws again, we had a good record at home technically. It didn't feel like it at times. I don't know how many casual fans would have come back and said, this is something I want to come back to. I feel like a lot of fans are like, this is a cool, shiny thing. I'll come back next year or if I have nothing else to do. But I don't know. I'd love to do the conversion of like how many new people became season ticket member purchasers or like 5-game mini plan purchasers. That's where I hold the team accountable of it's not the wins, but you've got to score more goals in front of Centerville Bank Stadium. And weirdly enough, they went off in all of the cup play. In Jägermeister Cup, and then if you count U.S. Open Cup when we played the Revolution, combined 8 goals in 5 games. So if you factor that out across the regular
every game
season,
was a cup game, we'd be the best team ever.
We'd be amazing. We'd be amazing. But that is why I would have to. I want to say yes or no so that I don't have to split this vote. I'm going to say yes on the financial, the club operations and everything, and the actual results of where we got in the table and how we ended it. But if I have to put my hat on one or another, I don't think this was as successful of a season as it should have been, considering the money and investment that went into this team building, into the roster construction, and into like what we thought would be the carryover. There was too much of a reset and growing pains that I would want, because if we took this now into next year, this wouldn't be a success, right? Because like those excuses go out the window. They're not excuses, they're legitimate things. We had injuries. I don't think I could give the team the same deferred. Like I want to say it was successful, but I think it's more important to say this wasn't good enough and we have to grow from it. But I'm not going to be angry about it. I'm not going to say like, how dare you? You wasted 14 weeks of my life. Like I'm very proud of this organization. I'm very happy for what they did. I think Coach Kano has a long runway to grow. I think that as long as he continues success forward for him, I think there's success in this team. But I also come from a school of like, if I had a report card to give to my parents, if I had 4 A's and 1 C, we're not even talking about the A's, Jason, we're talking about that C. And that's kind of how I want to treat this with Kano, with respect. I want to say you did a lot of great work this year, but it wasn't enough. So for that regard, I'm going to say it was not a successful season, despite the fact that we made an Eastern Conference final, and every single one of these people should be proud of what they did.
Wow. Mic drop there.
Isn't it kind of wild though that we made an Eastern Conference final in 2 of the 3 of them? Not that now, like the way you put it. I still agree with what I said, but that is kind of wild. And a Jägermeister Cup semifinal.
I want to say this was a success, but I also need to make sure that they understand that, like, again, we've heard this a lot. Like, New England expects winners; they want champions. you can't just continuously say we made playoffs, we made deep runs. Like at one point, you're going to want it all. And so I feel like we would be in a better mental position to say, Torin, about how our stats did not improve. Let's get where we need to get and then be satisfied with our accomplishments versus we did it really well, because I feel like when people start saying they did things really well, they get complacent. They put things on the back burner, they deprioritize. So I would rather leave the team hungry and say fans wanted more, fans expected more, and let that be, because I said this. If that's what it takes, but I don't mean it in any malice way. Like, I think the best of all of these players, and I know they all gave their hearts and souls to this, and it just didn't work out, and a lot of things worked against this year, and you can't hate it, but like you can't rest on your laurels. That's the best way to say it. You cannot rest on your laurels just because you got to 2 finals doesn't mean you've earned anything for next year. I think Connor would say the same thing, and we get to talk to him for the end of the year, and I think he would say, like, hey, we didn't do anything yet. Final question about Connor. On paper and successfully in his team and all of that, you can't deny the fact that he has now gone to 2 Eastern Conference finals in the USL. Him as an assistant manager next season, would they want to come buy him out, or once his contract expires, is this a direct elevator ride straight up to an MLS organization? Jason, we'll start with you.
I think there's potential, but I don't think it happens this season. I think that they'll kind of look at the season as a whole and then say, there's potential here. Let him cook for another year or 2, and then maybe kind of, if he continues to like hit those milestones, then I think someone will come after him.
I fully agree. I think, also kind of Kano is a coach on the younger side. He's a newer coach that I think definitely these 2 seasons, unless he for 3 years, if we have issues, let's take a look at this guy. But I think if we're speaking right now, I think it's an issue of consistency. He's great in playoffs. He's great in. It's one of those things where if you give us any team in the USL and say you play them for 90 minutes, I think Connor can put out a great lineup, great tactics. He can go ahead and put in a great fight and win a lot of those matches. Put him in a 30-game season, and that's where the struggles start to come. I think it's that maybe you need to get backups in certain areas and overloading on too many positions. So I think if he sorts that consistency out, I would say for sure give it 2-3 years, and he will be either at an assistant or even
underlying thing we don't talk enough about, and maybe you would blame it on some of the transfers that we had this season, but also some of the success. You could argue too, like, he's not just a first or now second year head coach, he's also a second year general manager. So having both of those feathers in your cap, that gets you even farther along, whether you go one direction or not. I'm sure Kano would probably tell you he would always want to remain a coach first and foremost, but that opens up even more whether he goes MLS in his next life, or a USL team thinking Division 1 in 2 years says, hey, we like what you're doing. You built an expansion side. You have an eye for building teams and playing teams. So, like, come on aboard and, we'll spend all the money and splash the cash on you. And, we've never really said it because I don't think it's fair. I think it creates a storyline that doesn't matter, but, like, he's also one of the few black coaches in all of the soccer leagues out here, and he's been doing a tremendous job in that aspect because there really is not a lot of representation of black coaches in the soccer leagues. So, like, he kind of fits the bill in like 1,000 different ways, and he's doing it all in just his second year of, like, top experience. Whether you didn't like the Pittsburgh game or not from the tactics standpoint, or you had beef with some of the decisions he made through the season, he's still a premier. He's still a top flight coach in this league, and I think he has to get his flowers for that.
Absolutely.
So Torin, we didn't have you on the squad at the beginning of the year, but we did a 90-50-10 assessment of where we thought the team would go within the league, at the beginning of the season. So I pulled them up, and we're just going to go over really fast as we wind down the show here, because of course we're running along for an end of season episode. But Jason, I'm going to read yours, and then you can read mine, and we'll talk about each of them. And Torin, feel free to laugh and comment on how wild some of these are. So in our 90% for Jason, you said we had a 90% chance of making the playoffs. You wrote that this team is too good to miss them. Even if they have an average season, the team would have to implode to miss the playoffs. Jason, does it count with like 18 injuries? Does that count as implosion?
Maybe. Feels like I was not too far off there.
Your 50% was that we earn a home playoff game. So you missed this one.
It's a coin flip. Right.
But I think we thought after ending the season last year in 5th, we thought that with the majority of the roster coming back, it made sense. So you hedged your bets on that. The Eastern Conference Finals. I like that you didn't commit to the USL Cup final, but way to stick to that. I was actually angry when we pulled these up. Why did you think we would make it to the Eastern Conference Final, but not the USL Cup final?
I don't know. I mean, like in regards to, we talked about how often do teams actually do this, and you don't see it in a lot of other leagues either. It's rare. So, it worked out in my favor. When we look at yours, you said 90% we make the playoffs. Team came into its own midseason. So I think you were kind of assuming they would carry that into next year.
On, to be honest.
I did not think we would. I even think when we talked about it, I was like, it'll be a home. I agreed when I saw your 50%, but but it was definitely, we were in relegation battles for a bit of the season. So I'm glad we both pulled that one off.
Yeah. We look at your 50%. We advance out of round 3 in the Open Cup and hopefully take on the Revs. So weirdly, the Revs part was right there.
We advanced out of round 3.
That was round 3
because we beat hard.
I forget that we don't start right away, and I was kind of thinking,
oh no, I got it. Oh, so this whole time you've been ready to insult me, not realizing I'm due.
No, I only read it 3 seconds ago. I forgot about it. And last one here, 10% Steven Turnbull scores against us in one of our matchups. Didn't exactly happen, but
so close.
So close. I mean, the assist to Demus,
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to count it. I'm going to count it through proxy. Steven Turnbull. I should have put Steven Turnbull creates a goal contribution against us. That's my lesson learned. And I also like that you omitted it. I wrote, should this be 90%? And I feel good.
I thought you typed that in after.
No. That was that's copied straight from the notes from last time. So I feel good. Nailing all my markers. But I do remember we did both think that this would be a home playoff team. And so we definitely room for improvement there. And I think, again, going back to was this a successful season? I think if we really want to put an early baseline expectation for next year, did we talk about this in the car? I don't know. Or did we talk about it at the stadium? It was as the train was rolling by, like with my unbridled rage as the lightning storm was happening around us. But we talked about somewhere about, would we rather be this team that we saw this year and make it to the Eastern Conference Final, or would we rather be a really good team in the regular season?
We were talking about this in the hotel lobby.
Okay. And I would have to say the goal should be, if we are Louisville next year and we have the time of our lives in the regular season, I want that first. I want a good foundation built on regular season play, like attractive soccer. And then, let's see what happens when it comes to, the cup run. I don't want to continue to be this dangerous, inconsistent team in the first half of the season, turn it on, and then squeeze into playoffs and then, get all the way to, just, a dollar short, so to speak. I would rather be an exciting team in the regular season and then see where the chips fall in the postseason. I don't know if you guys agree, Torin. Would you rather see, I mean, you're a traditional Englishman at this point, so you're all about supporter. You're all about just the regular first place finish. But do you agree, or would you rather see one or the other?
I'm trying to think of my overall mental health, what would be better for me. I think overall mentally, I would have more good times than bad times if we placed higher but went out in the playoffs early. So I'm gonna narrowly go with that one. But I think it would be a nice change of pace as well. If I won't lie, that would be quite nice to kind of, not kind of. I mean, the most important thing, and you said earlier, is if we're winning games by a lot at Central Bank Stadium, that's all I care about. So if we place 7, but we're winning every game 3-0 at Central Bank Stadium, fine by me. That's fine by me.
Yeah. All right. If we could like get a cup victory next year, it almost like I wouldn't want to suffer through it again, but it would be kind of worth it in that regards, right? Because you kind of think about for all how the last 2 seasons of Louisville, they got knocked out both years. Sure, they made it to Eastern Conference last year, but this year unceremoniously got knocked out by Detroit. So at that point, you kind of almost say like that was a great summer run of all these home games, but it didn't get you anything.
Jason, my bank account can't handle this road warrior lifestyle.
Yeah.
Okay. I need my playoff games at Centerville Bank Stadium moving
forward.
No,
I'm so down for that too.
we were just for the fans, just so they know, we had buy scripts ready to purchase $900 flights to Tulsa. And we were then praying that it was actually going to be Albuquerque because we found $450 flights out of Santa Fe. So like my life cannot handle. I need Conno Smith to either put us on the charter flights for the players next year, or I need us to play some home games in the playoffs at Centerville. But listen, it's been amazing. This show has been a ton of fun. Want to get through some program notes before I give the final words over to you and Torin. We're going to be releasing. We're obviously now kind of winding down podcast schedule. I know all of you guys love an hour and a half of us in your lives twice a week, but we will be winding things down. We will get some sort of player reaction podcast out like we did last year for the Thursday show. So it'll just be an audio only one because most of the players don't want to be on video talking about, losing. So we're going to do that. We're going to have one final mailbag for the season. So I highly encourage you guys. And again, if you don't already subscribe to all of the different social media, please do. Like, we don't make us start charging like for ads that you don't want us to read through, because you don't want that in your lives. Just subscribe to all of that stuff so that it helps grow the podcast beyond what all of the great new listenership we've had this season is. But you have one last chance to get into the mailbag for anything you had curiosity of the season, of this last game, and we'll go through all of that. After that, we do have some interviews, personalities that we're going to talk to as like a post-season post-mortem. Hopefully we get Kano back on. I don't know if he will want to talk to us, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to get our normal scheduled kind of, reflection on the season. I always really enjoy those conversations. And then we're going to go on a break because we deserve a break. You guys, you lovely human beings, we dedicate way too much time to you guys, and we need to recharge the batteries as well. But just so you guys know, the Defiant 1636 is going through their board election process right now. So if you want to cast your vote early, Jason and I have the privilege of being in charge of the voting ballot box at the East Providence Yacht Club, or more commonly known as Epic, on December 6th from 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So there's a bunch of different voting opportunities there. But if you want to come hang out with us, maybe have an adult beverage or two with us as we sit there and man the post, would love to talk soccer, talk shop, talk about life with you guys. So if you want to choose us as a destination to cast your ballot, feel free to do so. So that's the programming. Plenty more still to come, while we go through this unscheduled, you're not going to say it at the same time, same frequency, but you'll still get content from us. And, we love you all. It's been such an amazing run here in this third season. It's weird to think that we're in season 3 and the club's only in season 2, but here we are living our best life.
Yeah, it really has been a great year. Maybe not for everything, but like for the community as a whole, right? Engaging with all the fans, hanging out with Defiance, and honestly, even some of those bad games, I had a blast just catching up with friends.
You're practically a La Banda member now, by the way. You're like an honorary La Banda member. So you and Justin are definitely like permanent La Banda members. So I appreciate that.
I'll buy one of those practice pads and I'll fill in one game.
Torin, I know we don't get to have you on as often. Any final words, any final thoughts, feelings, or shout outs as we wind down here?
Oh God, I mean, I could speak for hours, but no. And then on
You
a
get
real note,
you get 1 minute now. Okay, we're running
I'm
long.
one.
I don't
Oh
know if you
God.
know.
No, on a real note, honestly, it's been such a pleasure, doing this with you guys. Again, we mentioned earlier that this is my first year with you guys, and I will forever be grateful to the both of you for letting me do this. I love every minute of it, and to have this new sort of family and Defiance and you guys is always great. And a huge thank you to everyone out there who tunes in and watches. And I know all three of us see all the nice things, and I think we've grown so much. I was initially brought in to be the producer behind the scenes, and to kind of see how much we've grown in this last 6 months or so, and make my way up to the big stage every now and then as well. It's been great. And I think the final thing I'll say is, I think my sister will kill me if I don't say this. I want a big shout out to my father, Papa Nate. It's his birthday today, so I know he's watching right now. So happy birthday, Dad.
Do you want to sing him happy birthday? I mean, you
Oh
can.
God, no, God, no. That's where we end.
All right, everyone. It's been great as always. But please make sure to check out our friends over at the Blazing Musket for all of your New England soccer coverage. And that's including RAFC at theblazingmusket.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at RAFC Podcast. We got one of those Instagrams. It's at Raising Anchor. And then you can always go check out our website, raisinganchorpodcast.com. Anchor's up, y'all.
Anchor's up for one
Anchor's
last
up.
time. We will see you guys in the future. Until then, take care.